KR King of D&D Homebrew, talking today about utilizing fictional characters to create NPCs in your world. You know, you can draw these from films or books, TV shows, graphic novels, any number of sources. And it's one of those things that from the very beginning of D&D, we used to, when we saw movies or, was reading comic books, we would say, what kind of character class would this person to just be if we had them in the world? And the thing that's very useful about taking a fictional character is you already have kind of a background, origin story. You have quirks and personality issues. You have their motivations created for you. You just translate and you can make changes to them and alterations to fit the setting of your world. Kind of who NPCs, existing people already are. But a lot of that work has been done for you. And on my Patreon this week, I'm going to be creating a bunch of characters based on some of the ones I talked here about today. So check that out. The PDF version is only $3 a month, my friend. And you get 4 of those each month, 4 different PDFs that I've created. So I'm going to start with what's on the thumbnail, right? The Joker, drawn from The Dark Knight, drawn specifically from the Heath Ledger character from that film. Not the newer Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, partly because I haven't seen the film, but partially because I think Ledger's portrayal is this iconic, chaotic, crazed, and nihilistic figure. If you've ever seen that famous scene with the Joker with the mobsters, where his full, unpredictable nihilism is on display, you think to yourself, that's an NPC that would wreak havoc wherever they went. And they'd have to have some kind of power base. They'd have to have some way to survive, right? And that source of that survivability could come, I think, from either skills as a sort of a rogue class or something, as a wizard, something like that, or a warlock, let's say, with a patron that fuels them with this insane, lust for mayhem and chaos, because that's what the Joker is all about. You can have this figure come in, surprise the players in some way, make some announcements, speak in riddles or taunt them or make jokes and whatnot. Not necessarily threaten them initially, but then disappear again. And whatever they do, everything would be unpredictable. So let's say they wear jester's clothing, even though this figure, the Joker, is a highly skilled wizard or arcane trickster or something like that. Because this is unusual. It attracts attention, They have bells on them that they can turn off or on them. They're magic, They can have implements, a little jester wand. Maybe that's the focus if they're a wizard. And their spells are illusion-based or something. And I think the key here with a Joker figure is they're not on anyone's side. They're not even on their own side. That's why I think the warlock is interesting. Some patron is just this god of chaos, right? No one should win. Everyone should be in turmoil. Everyone should be stirred up, right? Again, it's based always on some issue with that has happened in the Joker's background, and you can decide on what that is. But again, this distortion of reality, hence the face paint that they wear with the smile, it's artificial, and we've all seen that. You use that to make a distortion of the humanoid. It's an unreal face. It's an unreal person. No one like this could exist. He's a pure nihilist. And you could say, well, what's the survivability of that? I think there is self-preservation because they want to continue to sow chaos, especially if they have a patron in the warlock. But they could be an arcane trickster who just decides, I want to survive to keep doing this. They're not really going to have allies. They're not going to have a family. They're not going to have any of the usual things we associate with a humanoid, which also can be weaknesses, right? A villain, that's the villain's weakness is love. They have negative weaknesses. The Joker has none of these. So I think it's a very powerful figure I think it strikes fear because, again, they're not going to necessarily, they might want to have the players succeed at something to help sow this chaos, because they know it's going to make trouble for other people. They could even ally with the players if it serves that purpose, but at any moment they could turn on them. And you make this obvious when introducing or they're hearing about this character. So the Joker, he's cool. All right, something a little more benign. If you think of Doc from Back to the Future, you have an inventor type, right? You could have an artificer or an alchemist or something like that. But you can also just have a wizard that's also a tinkerer. But the thing about this is you have the classic absent-minded professor person, always forgetting things, always very curious, always on to the next thing, but a little scattershot, a little scatterbrained. But at the heart of them, very powerful. So you can have the forgetful wizard. It doesn't always have to be a tinkerer. The artificer seems an obvious character class, but you might not want to use those or whatever. Your system doesn't support them. The wizard is kind of a universal character class in a fantasy-based RPG. And this character would be, bombastic in a friendly way, making all sorts of declarations, remembering half of some super critical information that they've forgotten, but enough to give the characters enough clues. They might ask the characters, hey, I need help in finding this rare substance. Would you, assist me? And perhaps they have all sorts of cash and whatnot. Again, the artificer with all sorts of clockwork guardians and stuff. They might have a very loyal assistant or spouse that is there, kind of keeping things in order. But Doc essentially is let's say, chaotic good if you use an alignment system, but when he wants to get something done, he just, he might take the players with him on his trip into the future, whatever that is, however, whatever the version is in your world. So there's always a little bit of a risk hanging around with this person, right? They're not just the benevolent old scribe or, lawful good Gandalf. They're a wild card, right? Because his curiosity, his boundless desire to find out new information, to experiment with things can cause problems. All right, next we have the Punisher. This is one, when the Punisher came out, I was a kid when it came out. He was a bad character. I think he was Spider-Man or whatever, and he came in as like a hired assassin, right? Tried to kill Spider-Man. If that's what it was, I don't know. But, he's still pretty badass, but I think they've softened him a bit for the movies, and now I know there's a TV show. But in the original comic books, the Punisher, was ruthless. If, again, his family was killed, he was a Vietnam vet in the originals, he had also PTSD, and he just killed ruthlessly, right? No pity, no sense. If he was after you, there was nothing you could say that would stop the Punisher. And depending on who the Punisher is seeking vengeance on, again, I'm thinking of a warrior, but could also be like a vengeance cleric, or even if you have paladins, it could be an anti-paladin or oath breaker type person. That breaking of the oath is what's causing them to seek out this vengeance. But if the players are assisting them or seem to be helpful in wreaking this vengeance, then the Punisher character could be an ally. But if for any reason the success of this vengeance the players get in the way, or the players actually have to be pushed out of the way, the Punisher's going to do it. Vengeance is all. Whatever that backstory is. It's very powerful in the comic book. The mob kills his family, right? But you can have any sort of thing. But that's what motivates this. And the Punisher has, a very special set of skills to enact their vengeance. So this is someone the players can come across or hear about first or whatever. Maybe they come to a place and the Punisher got there before them and killed someone, or was extracting information in a brutal fashion, or starts to follow them after they've killed something. They have a confrontation meeting, and depending on these circumstances, that Punisher, as I said, could be an ally, could just be stay out of my way, because if you get in my way, no pity or something. Now, again, you got, let's say 5, 6, whatever, how many PCs, if there's one Punisher, either really high level, really tough to take, has associates, has a gang of people with him, however you want to do that. Just have some bandits, and if you want to have higher level ones or something, again, depending on the level of your party and campaign, the Punisher is going to be someone that they're going to remember. Laconic, talks in short phrases. You better stay out of my way. Kind of fun even doing it. Next, we have 11 from Stranger Things. This is the classic child with powers figure. I had one of these in the last campaign, this little girl who was with the wild folk or whatever, and she had tremendous intelligence. She was recognized. Her affinity to magic was super powerful, and all these characters were sort of vying for it. It never really went as far as it could because the campaign kind of went in a different direction. And I wasn't really thinking of 11 per se, but when you look at that character and you think she should be innocent. She should not have any, goals of gaining power or, I don't know about revenge or something. The revenge, if it does occur, it has to be sort of sublimated in this childlike perspective. And then if it comes out, if you think of Firestarter, right, the Drew Barrymore film, that's another innocent with powers. The 11 has the thing, too, where at first she doesn't remember what happened to her. This is a classic trope that is really useful. The players come across this figure. She doesn't know what to do. She's scared. They protect her instinctively. Maybe they kill whoever or, get away from whoever was first pursuing her. Then they begin to investigate. There's something more there. Because the thing about an 11 figure, the thing about the child with powers, is that there's almost always a fairly elaborate story behind it. And people are pursuing this character because they're going to get something from her. It can be, I used 11 and Firestarter happen to be girls. It can be anything. It can be any race. It can be any, D&D. You can just spread this out. But the character is very sympathetic to your players. They're going to defend and try to aid an 11 type character. Because naturally, we just as human beings, we want to protect children, right? We want to make sure they're safe. And there's a character, and and we also want to be careful of their powers because again, they get into a situation where they feel threatened. They're going to do something about that. And if it's the players, that's a problem. But even if it's NPCs that are perhaps not directly, threatening the players or are very powerful, and this 11 figure feels that threatening. There's a wild card aspect because she's a child. She doesn't necessarily make reasoned out decisions. She's just reacting, and she's traumatized from her experiences. So that is something that's endlessly fascinating as a literary trope, as a device, a character, and it can be for a RPG setting. And then last but certainly not least, we have Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, the schemer, right? The person, I think of always the vizier or something, the advisor to the king who's constantly scheming and, has their own set of goals and is manipulating the king. You had Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings as this kind of character. I feel like Littlefinger is a little more competent, not as, obvious in their manipulation. They may see the players as an ally at first. They may say, hey, these players are good. And you don't always have to play them, especially so in the Game of Thrones situation, they're in kind of a kill or be killed, very political world where people are maneuvering all the time. He's always thinking through everything that he's doing and trying to stay 2 steps ahead, trying to think. So if he makes an alliance with the players, where they're going to go, what's the information he gives them if they're going to do something for the king or whatever. And then thinking about if they succeed, I will do this. If they fail, I will do that. And always trying to, get what is it that they desire? Is it to be the king at some point? To marry the princess? That's a classic. We saw that in Wormtongue. Is it merely to accumulate enough treasure and magic items and then disappear and just enjoy their wealth in some far-off place? Or is it just the thrill of manipulating all these people? The game itself is all they seek. And they're just endlessly juggling these balls. And those influence what's going to happen when the players encounter this schemer, right? This politician, this vizier. That's what I always think about. But it could be other people as well. You could have a wizard who appears very friendly to the players, but has a darker purposes. And not necessarily, I worship a demon and I'm evil. No, they just darker in terms of they may slip some information the players tell to someone that the players don't want if it's to their advantage, and keep it hidden, right? Because the other thing was, yes, Littlefinger, we know as the audience, you can't trust this person. And obviously the characters in there knew the sort of work he did, but at the same time, he was useful to these people as well. He had a power base. He did things that they knew kind of had to be done, kind of thing, their dirty work and whatnot. And so when you think of this character and you think in your game, depending on the kind of game you're playing, but even, because Game of Thrones isn't what I would call lawful good, heroic fantasy, right? So maybe the Littlefinger character has to be in a grittier campaign, because if they're in that, they just stick out like a sore thumb, or everyone is either good or evil. If you have that kind of world, you don't have any neutral sort of shades of gray. But if you do, then this figure is someone who would be an interesting NPC for the players to meet. And a shout out, of course, to my Patreon supporters. Guys, I really appreciate it. As I said, I'm going to create some of these and more as PCs and talk about these figures that I've created in a little more detail. So check out the Patreon if you're interested. And to those of you that are already out there, thank you for your support. And thank you for watching my video. I'd love to hear your comments. Like the video, all that stuff. But most importantly, as always, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.